Hello, and welcome to the PT Marketing Power Hour, highlighting successful strategies from North America's fastest growing clinics so you can learn from their wins and power your practice growth. I'm your host, Neil Trickett, CEO of Practice Promotions, and today's focus, we're going to talk about, every clinician's bane, which is patients not completing their plan of care, and how you can use technology to improve that as well as patient outcomes. So I've got Vikram Sethuraman here with us. He's the CEO of PT Wired, and I've worked with Vikram for many years, and he's got some pretty cool tech that he's been helping clinics with here, and he's going to share with us his company, PT Wired, and how that helps with patient compliance and home exercise programs and all kinds of interesting ways to get patients to complete their plan of care. And so welcome, Vikram. Great to have you on the podcast with us here today.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Great to be back on.
Yeah, absolutely. So for our listeners out there, can you just give a kind of brief synopsis of like, what is PT Wire? Like, what does it do? And why did you start it?
Yeah, so PT Wired is a patient engagement platform for physical therapy. And the idea behind PT Wired is that it's a digital interface between patients and providers for all things that could be benefited in between clinic visits in terms of home exercise program engagement, communication and messaging with the provider, appointment scheduling, bill pay, marketing, everything down the line, all things patient engagement. And the reason I started it actually was, I'm not a PT. We've got 4 PTs on our team, but now a long time ago, seven years back, I had a hip labral tear, went through PT, had the surgery, had 6-8 months of PT, and from my perspective as a patient, I experienced the gap between patient and providers in between those clinic visits. And as a patient who was really motivated to do everything I possibly could to get better, get back to playing sports, living an active lifestyle, and not feeling like I had all the tools I needed in between those visits when I wasn't actually physically with my provider, was ultimately what led me down the path to start talking to PTs and learning about the overarching problems that are related to patient engagement in PT.
Awesome. Yeah. So you've been there, right, as a patient and had that experience. And I think for a lot of practice owners, we focus on marketing being such outward facing, right? Like, what are we doing for websites and SEO and advertising and all these kind of things to draw in new patients? But sometimes we don't put as much energy or effort into really looking at the marketing within the clinic. So in your marketing within the clinic, it's all about that patient experience. It's about that patient engagement. And the more, let's face it, like our clients love usually working with the clinicians and the outcomes. And we're in a very unique position in that it's very different to a lot of healthcare that we actually get to meet with the patient over and over again, multiple times throughout the week, and we build a great rapport with them. But I think, maybe you can elaborate on this, but one of the biggest challenges we see sort of in the PT industry is patient dropout, right? And that disengagement, which can cost you an enormous amount of, goodwill in the clinic, publicity, frustrations, let alone the revenue that's lost from not having the patients in for that full plan of care. So is that something that you typically see when you're working with practice owners, is that patient engagement is a big issue?
Oh, absolutely. And especially as you grow the clinic, this is what the data shows is as the clinic gets bigger, and more providers are added, retention goes down, patient retention goes down. Some stats, 20% of patients drop out in the first 3 visits. Overall, 70% of patients don't fulfill all their authorized visits. And like you mentioned, what we see a lot is, many clinics have a focus on patient acquisition, which is obviously important and great. But if you haven't really perfected the retention side of things, it's kind of like you're pouring water into a bathtub with a hole in it, right? Like you want to plug that before you spend a lot of time on patient acquisition, not only to get, the average patient visit count up for the patients that you have, but like you just mentioned in terms of reputation, then now we're getting their friends and family referred. Now we're getting that same patient back 6 months later when they have an ankle problem instead of a shoulder problem. So that's always the place that we need to make sure that's razor tight, that the patient experience is optimized. We're focused on retention prior to acquisition. because otherwise you're going to have to acquire a lot more patients to see the same revenue numbers that you would if you just have a focus on, retaining the patients that you've already got.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like when you look at that patient engagement and patient experience, like it all starts even before they come in for that first evaluation, right? And so, um, have you seen ways in way that as people might engage with an app or emails or start to be connected to the clinic prior to the eval? Like if that's worked on, does that help improve, those retention rates?
Definitely, and you're 100% right. So from some other stats that we've seen recently, 74% of patients have reported that they're frustrated with the onboarding process. 68% of them wanting to be able to book appointments from their phone. And we know that, even before that first eval, there's so many things we can do to set the standard for the experience that they're going to get as a patient, from a technological standpoint, as well as just in terms of how we interact with them as providers.
Yeah, because I know like we're really going beyond just a lot of times our software because sometimes with our EMRs and other types of software, maybe other apps, we focus a lot on just the home exercise program, right? And that's a critical part of people getting better and having good things and the compliance with that. And we'll talk about what PT Wire does with that here in a second. But I think patient engagement goes so much further than just the home exercise program. And so can you walk us through in terms of like what would the ideal scene be in the clinic for that patient engagement and what clinicians should be or practice owners should be looking at in that patient engagement route through the clinic?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, so this is why we kind of think of it as a patient engagement platform versus a home exercise program platform. The way we think about it is, the home exercise program's kind of like the foot in the door to get the patient to download the app by basically saying, hey, you've got your exercises on there, you can message your provider. But then once we have the app on their device, now we have a platform on their device, which all of us have on us all the time these days, that we can use to leverage for all these other patient engagement purposes, whether it's, marketing by sending them push notifications with different marketing messages, whether it's linking to, the clinic blogs provided by Practice Promotions to provide more content for the patient to engage with on the app, whether it's them allowing them to schedule their visits from the app or view their upcoming visits. But in terms of how we actually do this from start to finish in terms of the patient experience, one thing that we provide to the clinics is a kind of promotional flyer that they keep on the front desk or in the waiting room with the app, screenshots and information about the app, QR code. But then right then and there, patient scans that, downloads the app to their device. They get an explanation of it from their provider, and then the provider, when they set up the patient, can add them either by phone number or email. Then they get a text or an email with the link to activate their account, and then they're into the app. And again, we kind of position it to them by saying, hey, you've got your videos, you can message me as the provider, but then now we have a system that can market to them, that can detect if they're likely to drop out, so then the provider can actually intervene before they drop out, and then ultimately provide the clinic with the tools, the engagement tools that they need in between visits to keep the patients from dropping out and ultimately get them to discharge rather than drop out.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's what I really like about PT Wired is it's really comprehensive when it comes to patient engagement. And I think if we look at when a patient comes in, if you have this really rich experience from the get-go, even before you meet your provider, you're much more, connected with that clinic, right? And you're more committed to seeing that this can be a great experience, as well as, obviously a solution to get you out of your pain or problem. But I think what I really like about the PT Wired app is I look at it from a marketing perspective too, right? So one thing that's really unique about this is that it's actually as far as from an app standpoint, when you see that little icon on your phone, it's actually branded to the clinic. So when you go and it's like, XYZ physical therapy, its own app, and you see that on your phone, it's like, wow, this place must be pretty special because they have their own app, right? And then they get into the actual platform, and then it's kind of standardized there. But that from a marketing perspective, it really makes your clinic stand out because it's unique to your clinic the way that it's coming across on the phone. But as they come through, it's that engagement part of it. And I think what a lot of patients really look at is how well can they connect with that clinic even when they're not in there. So we know how important the home exercise program part of it, but what I really like too is the way that a lot of patients, they want to have some sort of ability to communicate with their provider, right? So if something comes up, if they their pain increases or something, that's where a lot of people drop off, right? Because they think it's not working. So if you might be if your patient's on like visit 4 or 5 and you think it's going pretty good as a provider, but all of a sudden they've been doing okay, their pain flares up that evening because of something, they're kind of pushing themselves and they're making things move that haven't moved in a long time. They might get discouraged. They might start to think, is this really helping? It's making things worse. And so instead of being able to easily reach out and communicate with a concern or a question to the provider, they start to go, well, maybe I should look at something else. Maybe I shouldn't go back. And that's when people drop off. So the easier that you make it where that patient can have some point of communication to their provider, and that provider can easily text them back or through a platform that's secure like that, it goes a long way in building that rapport. And like you said, discovering those things before they become a problem. So if the patient's like, you know what, I had more pain last night, I'm not sure if it's working, that provider can know that information and get right on it and say, hey, you know what, why don't you come in today? Let's take a look at it. Let's get it calmed down. And the patient feels really well taken care of. So
Mm-hmm.
that's really one
Mm-hmm.
thing I like about the PT Wired app there. Um, so let's talk a little bit here about a big part of patient compliance and also their results, which is home exercise programs, right? And I think as clinicians out there, we can all agree that one of the hard things is getting people to do their home exercise programs, which we know benefits them. And some people are really compliant and a lot of people aren't. So at PT Wired, what are some of the tips and tricks that you found over the years, Vikram, working with clinicians to actually, get patients to actually do their home exercise programs?
Yeah, I mean it's a problem everybody's very familiar with, and the some of the more recent studies say 72% of patients don't do their HEPs. A lot of other studies say it's actually higher than that number. So either way, massive room for improvement, as we all know. And the way we approached this was at the very beginning, kind of looked at the factors affecting why people don't adhere to their home exercise programs, and then built our system around those to address those specifically. So if you break down the three most impactful factors for home exercise program adherence, they're perceived barriers, self-efficacy, and social support. So we can kind of tackle those one by one. So for perceived barriers, that's things like people forget, they don't have time, they're unable to kind of fit it seamlessly into their routine. So it may not be as much of a motivation thing as kind of an organization thing. Um, and the way we address that is, first of all, it's not a piece of paper that's tucked away somewhere. It's on their phone, which they always have. And then also we have reminders that we send them that they can also customize, as well as then the instructions. So, part of going into forgetting is if it's like a stick diagram or like just like an image, that's a certain level of instruction. Whereas if it's a full video with, customized instructions that are added by the provider, that's another level that then provides better instruction to the patient. So that's
So
how we tackle the.
is there a way, like, I'm just curious because I can only imagine this would be how powerful this would be. Like if a patient didn't do their exercises that day, they get a little notification on their phones that, hey, have you done your exercises today? Does it do anything like that?
Yeah, so they can set the reminders like that. And then also from the provider side, you can see everything that they do and
Yeah.
then provide your input as your support as we could say as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's kind of multiple avenues there.
That's good because we all need reminders, right? Everybody's busy. And I think that's, again, what you just said is like a perceived barriers. People get busy, right? They forget and they're like, oh, I should be doing this. And you know what? I'll do it later. And then later turns into never. And
Yeah.
that's what it ends up happening. And so that's perceived barriers. And you said the other one was self-efficacy.
Yeah. So self-efficacy, that's the individual's belief that they're actually capable of achieving the goal here. So, um, what what really helps with this that we do, and this kind of is exactly what you were just talking about earlier, is, you know, a lot of patients, like you were saying, have this, they reach this point where they say, is this really working? Is physical therapy what I need for my issue, my pain? You know, is this making things worse? That's kind of the point of drop off, which is self-efficacy related. And there's really multiple approaches that can address that. And the way we do it, you know, there's the rehab exercises and the instructions, which provide them with the, you know, act, kind of like the specifics. But then there's the soft skills element, which is the, you know, if you talk to a lot of providers, they'll tell you that the soft skills are just as important, if not more important than, you know, the exercises you give them. And
Definitely.
in terms of the mechanism behind the exercises, that's explaining not only what to do, but why to do it. And I think if you look at behavioral science, in terms of having behavioral change for somebody, the why is so important to get somebody to make a change. You know, if you tell them, do these bridge exercises, it'll help, versus do these bridge exercises because, you know, this is how it's going to change the physiology, which will impact your back issue or whatever. Actually going through the full explanation, it makes a big difference. And, you know, even something, you know, that doesn't seem like a patient may actually be interested in the actual science behind it, even in a situation like that, the explanation has been proven to still impact behavior. Even when, you know, the science isn't fully something that that patient may understand, explaining it can still be massive in actually impacting their behavior. And so the way we do this, we have the option for the exercises, and then we also have what we call PT University, which is the educational side of things to go along with the exercises. And that's geared towards the explanation of the mechanism behind what they're experiencing, what the exercises are doing. So that way we have kind of both approaches there, the education as well as the exercise approach.
Cool. Awesome. And so that's perceived barriers, self-efficacy, and then the third one was
Social support. Yeah. So that's basically accountability and having, you know, the provider there to assist you in between clinic visits. Because obviously we know if a patient's with somebody in the clinic, they're going to have much more, you know, support, obviously, because the provider's right there to guide them through the exercises, answer any questions, etc. When they're at home and they're on their own, if they don't have any access to their provider, and like let's say that I have a visit next week and then I'm really confused about an exercise, I may not do that exercise until I see my provider next week if I have no way of, you know, clarifying an issue that I'm having or a confusion that I have. Whereas if I can send them a message, get a quick answer, then the next day, the rest of the time until my next visit, now I'm actually making progress because I have that support. So it's not only the kind of terms of clarifying what you're supposed to be doing, but the accountability is massive. The accountability is a huge part of behavioral change, and it's not even, it's just the fact that the provider can see if you're engaging or not is a huge difference. Not even needing the provider to actually have an eagle eye over what you're doing. One thing that we do every time that a patient finishes their routine is they get a pop-up on the app that says, great job, your provider's been notified that you've completed all your exercises for the day, and it'll have a picture of their provider right there. And
nice.
so it just kind of ties everything back into like,
Yeah.
we're here for you. It adds, you know, a little bit of kind of, you know, accountability there. But at the end of the day, this is what patients want, right? Patients are going to physical therapy to get better. So everything that we can do, even small behavioral things like adding a little bit of accountability or these extra instructive features, that's what patients want because patients want to get better. That's why they're there.
And I think too with the PT Wired app, like what's pretty cool is the gamification part of that too. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, so we have a couple elements to gamification. First, we have just streaks. Patients get a streak counter that accumulates after as they complete their exercises for consecutive days. They'll get medals and trophies and awards for completing their exercises, certain number of exercises, routines, etc. But one of the really cool ones is the customizable reward incentive program, where a clinic can actually pick some type of reward, whether it's like a branded T-shirt or a hat or like a, a branded mug or something, and that'll show up on the front page of the app, and then they can pick their metrics. So they could say, do your routine 10 times, and then you get a, branded XYZ physical therapy t-shirt, and it'll have the image of that t-shirt right there. It'll have a progress bar for them. So it adds another kind of fun element that the clinic can design to incentivize patients further to engage with their HEP.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? Is being able to make it fun, right? Make it accountable too. So I really like the way that you assign the home exercise program to the patient, and a lot of times when they come back in, you're like, "Did you do it?" Yeah, and they really didn't, right? But
Right.
if there's a way like, hey, if you check this off, your provider is going to be notified, right? They're like, oh, I better do it, right? And then if there's some fun activity with it too, like you said, like the gamification part of it, and what a cool idea to be able to bring out the competitive side of patients where they're gonna mark off that they did so many and they get to win something, right? And hey, sometimes we give out t-shirts anyway as like a marketing thing, but why not tie it in with their home exercise program and make it more fun, right? And kill two birds with one stone. So I love the way that you've really looked at that from um the thoughts and the mechanics of how people will interact, right? And the personality of people and how they'll engage with doing those activities. So I can see how that would improve engagement. It'll also improve clinical outcomes because of participating in their home exercise program better. So it's a win-win there on both sides. Now in today's world, I know this was sort of like one of the areas that you kind of spearheaded was in leveraging the apps in home exercise program and tying in the newer remote therapeutic monitoring codes. And so this has been a benefit to clinics, both with patient compliance but also from a revenue standpoint. So can you speak a little bit in terms of how you've approached that in helping clinics with RTM codes?
Yeah, so first, the reasoning that these codes exist in the first place is because the data shows that when patients have this type of a digital experience to augment what they're going, to be in addition to what they're actually doing in the clinic with the provider, they're getting the best outcomes, they're getting the best retention. So that's why these codes exist, to incentivize clinics to use these types of systems and use these types of engagement methods with their patients. And super exciting because, people have been doing this type of stuff for a long time. A lot of providers have already been providing these types of digital systems to patients, as well as, a lot of providers are even calling patients in between visits and checking in on them. That's been happening for a long time. And it's great that now there's actually codes we can bill for it to get a return on that time. And originally, obviously, it was just Medicare. Now it's the data is strong, so now a lot of commercial insurers have started to pick this up as well, which is very exciting. And this is kind of probably a whole other podcast in itself, so I'll won't spend too much time on it. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the ROI, you can add about $120 dollars per patient per month for patients who are meeting the requirements for these RTM codes. So it's definitely something that if you're already doing a lot of the things, fulfilling a lot of the requirements for it, you should certainly be billing for those codes. And especially when if you have providers that aren't fully booked out, they can be spending that time doing RTM. If you have cancellations, they can be spending that time doing RTM. Or even if you are fully booked out, but then a situation we see a lot, people are bigger clinics fully booked out. One provider maybe goes on maternity leave and wants to like have a hybrid model where they can, work from home for a little bit. We see people putting them into an RTM role where they manage all of the patients. So again, it's kind of probably a separate, longer conversation in itself. But the idea here being, if you're doing a lot of these things, use a system that tracks all these requirements. We track all the requirements for clinics. We let them know when they can bill what codes, and also provide them with analytics so they can optimize how they track the codes and how they engage with patients to maximize what they're making from RTM. Because yeah, I mean, with declining reimbursements and everybody's looking for ways to boost revenue, and this is a new channel, a new exciting channel that you could certainly get a new revenue stream from.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, a lot of this we do naturally. We're checking up on patients, we're checking on compliance. We can take it to a whole nother level too. And a lot of times we're kind of given those, we're just doing that pro bono, basically, right? We're giving it away as part of just caring for the patients. But there's a great additional revenue opportunity there that you should be billing for that time, and now there is the opportunity to do that. But like you said, it does take some tracking and making sure that there's compliance with that, and that you can prove that type of remote therapeutic monitoring is being done. And that's why, again, I really like what the PT Wired system does, is it allows you to have very good tracking on that and be able to prove to insurance companies like this is exactly what was done. But yeah, if you're not tapping into that as a practice, you should definitely look into it, because I don't think it takes that much effort, but you can get so much more out of it from the patient standpoint, right? And the relationship side of it, and you can get paid for it at the same time too, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think, do you have a little bit of that on your website too, in terms of like RTM information? Yeah. So if you go to ptwire.com, you can get some more information about like how RTM works and what some of the key things there. So I know that Vikram's got some information, maybe some blogs about that too. But
Mm-hmm.
now coming back to sort of this kind of the marketing side here, and working with patients, we know that word of mouth referrals are one of the best things, right? So obviously with better engagement, we get higher patient satisfaction, and so I'm just kind of curious from your end, as you've worked with clinics with your app and everything, like what are some of the things that you've seen to work well for increasing referrals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all the clinics that we work with who are performing the absolute best really just obsess with the patient experience. They think about it from pre-eval all the way through post-discharge, every step of the way. And boosting that satisfaction helps, but then another thing is making it easy to refer patients. That's a big thing. I mean, you may have super fans who, you never ask, and they never refer. One thing that we've seen people do. So first of all, on our app, it's customizable. You can add buttons, you can add links. For the page that you guys provide with Practice Promotions to refer a friend, we've had people link that to a button on the app. So then there's a refer a friend button on the app. So then patients can easily just click that button, type in the information of the friend, and that'll be sent through the system. We've even had people try and incentivize this with the reward system that I mentioned earlier, saying, know somebody that needs PT, like if they come in for free assessment, or a 30-minute assessment, whatever, we'll give you a XYZ t-shirt, XYZ physical therapy t-shirt. So um, I think that's one thing. Yeah, obviously we've got to obsess about the patient experience and make sure that it's really fine-tuned. But then once it is, do what we can to make it easy for patients to send us the referrals that they are eager to send us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. It's a great way to build your business. Um, it's probably the number one way to build your business, right? Is with customer satisfaction and asking for referrals. So really important there. And then we all know that in business, and especially in our practices, we want to have those Google reviews, right? We know that people look at those a lot. But what we don't think of sometimes is how the patient experience, patient engagement, how that all reflects and ties in with our Google reviews and our opportunity to collect those. So I know that you've worked with clinics on this before. And so what are some of the ways that you've been able to automate those?
Yeah, so we have kind of created a pretty interesting way of getting people to leave Google reviews through the app. And basically the way we do it, a lot of people are familiar with the method of asking for the NPS, and then based on the NPS, you can kind of ask them for reviews for the promoters. And what we found is that's a good method, it works, but then you can sometimes lose some people between those two steps, because sometimes for some patients, they just don't understand the difference between the NPS and the review. Some people will get asked for the review and they'll think, oh, I already left that, think of the NPS. So the way that we do this on the app is we kind of automate the NPS based on the engagement metrics. So we have an algorithm that will look at how the patient's engaging on the app, and then basically having corresponded to a threshold of engagement on the app to a promoter score. And then the patients who meet that engagement threshold will then just get a pop-up directly asking them to leave a review. It'll link them straight to the Google page for the clinic based on the location that they're attending therapy and ask them to leave a review. So we just get a better conversion rate for it because we skip a step basically for the patient, because every step that you have is a drop-off point where you're going to lose some people. So that, yeah, that's the way that we ask for reviews. And then again, the clinics have more options there in terms of customization. If you want to add just a button itself to link to the review page, that's another option. So, but yeah, that's our automated system for reviews.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean that just makes it again more easier to do and obviously more automated, and it's really tied in with patient engagement, right? So the more engaged a patient is, the much more likely they're going to leave a review. And like you said, if you can make it a simpler and less touch points, more reviews you're going to get from that, which again can really impact the way that people are experiencing you online, and obviously then that creates new patient opportunities coming in. So we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but I'd love for you to elaborate on a bit more, sort of the building your brand part of it and how you've used, the app and the branding approach to it. So can we talk about that a little bit and how that's all tied
Yeah,
together?
absolutely. So the way we always talk about it, you mentioned earlier how the clinic's brand is the app, right? We white label it to the clinic. When the patient looks on their phone, it's their clinic's name. It's not PT Wire that they see. And the way I always talk about clinics with this is, patients know XYZ physical therapy. They don't know PT Wired. They don't know the EMR systems names. They know, your clinic's name. That's the name they know. That's the name they're familiar with. So what we do is we keep our name out of it entirely from start to finish. The patients never know the PT Wired name. And that's really by design, because everything that we want them to experience, whether they're in the clinic or out of the clinic, is your clinic's brand. And it's also just impressive for a clinic to be able to say, hey, we have our own app. And then scan the QR code, you can download our app, and then that app is on their device. And even if it's 6 months later after discharge, they're still seeing your app's name because that's the clinic that they went to. So I think it creates a continuity of brand. And obviously, the more times that we can get the brand image and name in front of the patient's eyeballs, the better, in terms of keeping that imprinted in there. And then if it's on their phone, I mean, we all know how many times we look at it on our phone per day. We're getting so many more impressions of that, your logo and your name in the patient's to the patient. So in addition to just the branding of the app, then we have a lot of integrations, as I mentioned, with a lot of the content that Practice Promotions provides in terms of the blog that you guys create for clinics. We add a clinic blog page for that the patients can view the articles. The web page that there's a clinic web page or app web page that's put up on the website in terms of all the information about the app, a promotional page there. But yeah, again, it's just trying to keep the focus on the clinic, whether they're in the clinic or out of the clinic. That's the only brand that they're going to see.
Yeah, that's what I absolutely love about PT Wire. There is it creates like that cool effect of having your own app that the patient's going to engage with that whole time. Yeah, and I love what we've been able to work together where it creates that interaction between what's with their website, with their blogs, and the way that they can opt into the app through their website pages and all kinds of different ways there. So I love the way that that's come out. So we've talked a lot here about patient engagement, home exercise programs. And so do you have any final, words of advice for our audience out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just again say focus on the retention until that's iron tight before focusing more on acquisition, because otherwise you're just really increasing, you're just making it harder for the clinic to grow if you're just heads down on acquisition before retention is super fine tuned. And this is something we're always happy to help discuss. We work with tons of clinics and have seen lots of so many different instances of retention going up 20-30% just based on some changes, not just PT Wire, but other changes as well that have been implemented at the clinic. So we're always happy to chat, always happy to hear about your situations and make recommendations based on what we've experienced from all the people we work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I highly encourage you to check out ptwired.com. Like, go check them out, learn more about what they do for clinics. They do focus awesomely on that patient engagement and experience, which can really have a huge impact on patient retention, which really impacts your bottom line. So yeah, go to ptwire.com, check that out. Don't forget to use promo code practice promotions in there. If you hear us on the podcast, that's a great way to get connected with Vikram and his team, and he'll walk you through what they do for clinics at PT Wired. So Vikram, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today on patient engagement, and wishing you best of luck with everything. So thanks again for everything, and look forward to talking with you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, Neil.
Thanks again for joining us today. Be sure to check out practicepromotions.net/power. There, listeners can download over 9 checklists and free resources made to coach you through simple, proven marketing actions to increase new patients. So check it out today. That's practicepromotions.net/power, and I'll see you next time.